You are starving. Not the kind of hungry you feel at 2 p.m. when you skipped lunch. Real hunger. The kind that makes your hands shake and your vision blur at the edges. The kind that turns every rustle in the grass into something you want to kill and eat. But there is nothing to kill. The herd moved on 3 days ago. The last snare came up empty this morning. Your group has been walking since dawn and found nothing worth chasing. For roughly 300,000 years, this was not a worst-case scenario. This was just Tuesday. So what did you eat? The answer is stranger, smarter, and more surprising than almost anything you would guess. And it explains something fundamental about the body you are living in right now. I'm h1roPenguin. Just sit nicely and watch with me, by the way. Let's start with what most people assume. When people imagine ancient humans hunting, they picture a spear flying through the air, a large animal dropping to the ground, the group celebrating around a fire. That image is real. It happened. But it was never the whole story, and it was never even the main story. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living with and studying the Kungsan people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, beginning his fieldwork in the early 1960s. What he found reshaped how scientists understood prehistoric diets forever. Meat, on average, made up only about 30 to 40% of what the group actually consumed. The rest came from somewhere else entirely. Plants. Roots, tubers, berries, seeds, nuts, fruits, leaves, bark, and fungi. The unglamorous, unspectacular backbone of human survival for almost all of human history. But here is the part that surprises people. Your ancestors were not just randomly grabbing whatever they could find. They had knowledge. Deep, precise, accumulated knowledge passed down across thousands of generations. Knowledge that, if you were dropped into the same landscape today, you almost certainly would not have. Picture this. It is dry season somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, roughly 70,000 years ago. The grass is brown, the waterholes are shrinking, the animals have followed the rain hundreds of miles north. Your group, maybe 25 people, wakes before sunrise. The elders already know what today looks like. They have seen this before. Their grandmothers showed them what to do when the land goes quiet. You head not toward the open plain where the animals were, but toward a dry riverbed, because dry riverbeds hide something underground that almost nothing else can reach. A tubers. The mongongo nut, which Richard Lee documented as a caloric staple so reliable that the Kung sometimes asked why they should bother farming when the mongongo forest could feed them almost indefinitely. Marula fruits, rich in vitamin C. Wild yams buried a foot underground, storing energy like biological batteries waiting to be unlocked. The women in your group, and the older children, are the experts here. This is documented. Ethnobotanist Kat Anderson, who spent decades studying indigenous plant use in North America, described how traditional foraging knowledge was so specific that experienced gatherers could identify dozens of edible species by a single dried leaf fragment or the texture of soil above a buried root. Your ancestor knew which plants flowered before the rains, meaning they were ready to eat early. She knew which berries looked identical to poisonous ones but grew only on the south-facing slopes. She knew that a certain root was only safe to eat after roasting because the heat broke down the cyanide compounds inside it. That last one is important. Many wild plants produce chemical defenses, bitter compounds, toxins, things that kill insects or make animals sick. Your ancestors figured out over tens of thousands of years of slow and sometimes fatal trial and error exactly which ones could be neutralized by heat, water, fermentation, or time. They cracked the code on foods that would kill you if you ate them raw but sustain you beautifully if you prepared them correctly. This knowledge was not written down anywhere. It lived inside people. It was taught, memorized, and passed on like the most important thing in the world because it was. When the plants ran low too, your ancestors went smaller still. Insects. This is the part people grimace at, but across the fossil record and across nearly every hunter-gatherer society studied by modern anthropologists, insects emerge as a critical fallback food and sometimes a primary one. Termites, beetle larvae. Caterpillars, honeybee larvae still inside the comb. Grasshoppers, which are high in protein, iron, and calcium. Archaeological sites including ancient middens, which are essentially prehistoric trash heaps where we find the remains of what people ate, have turned up insect fragments alongside bones and shells at sites in South Africa, Mexico, and Southeast Asia. At Pinnacle Point, A cave site on the South African coast excavated by paleoanthropologist Curtis Marian and his team, researchers found evidence not just of shellfish consumption, but of remarkably broad dietary flexibility dating back at least 165,000 years. When one food source vanished, your ancestors pivoted fast. The ocean was another pivot point. Coastal groups learned to harvest shellfish, sea urchins, crabs, seaweed, and stranded fish during low tide. Shellfish in particular required almost no tools and almost no energy to collect, yet delivered significant protein and a suite of minerals including zinc and iodine that are genuinely difficult to get from inland plant foods. Iodine, which supports thyroid function and brain development, may have been one reason coastal-dwelling human groups showed rapid cognitive expansion. The sea was not just a food source. It may have been a brain upgrade. Inland groups without ocean access found their own version. Honey. Every documented hunter-gatherer group on Earth, without exception, sought honey with what researchers describe as almost obsessive intensity. Primatologist Richard Wrangham, whose work on cooking and human evolution produced the landmark book Catching Fire, has argued that calorie-dense foods like honey, tubers, and cooked starch were central to fueling the expansion of the human brain. Honey meant sugar. And sugar, to a body burning enormous energy just staying alive, was worth climbing a 40-foot tree and absorbing 100 bee stings to obtain. Your ancestors had methods for finding it. Honeycomb embedded in a cliff face, located by following the flight path of bees from a watering hole. A hollowed log making a faint hum. A bird called the honey guide, found across sub-Saharan Africa, which would fly toward a beehive and call out, leading humans directly to the source. The relationship between the honey guide bird and human foragers, documented by evolutionary biologist Claire Spottiswoode in studies published in the journal Science, is one of the only known cases of a wild animal actively cooperating with humans in a mutually beneficial hunting partnership. Your ancestor followed the bird got the larvae and wax left behind. Everyone ate. Now here is the part that reframes everything. When researchers began cataloging the full diet of surviving hunter-gatherer groups, something unexpected emerged. The so-called famine foods, the insects, the roots, the bitter leaves, the shellfish, the grubs, the pounded bark, were not signs of failure. They were signs of expertise. Groups that consumed the widest variety of foods tended to be the most nutritionally complete. Anthropologist James Soosman, who spent years living with the Jew/Honzi of Namibia, noted that their diet, even in difficult seasons, included micronutrients that modern Western diets are frequently deficient in, including magnesium, potassium, and multiple B vitamins, sourced from a diversity of wild plants that most modern people have never heard of. Your ancestors were not eating worse than you when the hunt failed. In some measurable ways, they were eating better. The diversity was the point. No single food, no single strategy, no dependence on one thing that could disappear. Dozens of fallback options, layered into a system of knowledge so deep it took generations to build and would take generations to lose. And here is the part that lands closest to home. Modern humans have systematically dismantled that system. Not over thousands of years, over about 2 generations. The number of plant species consumed by humans globally has collapsed from an estimated 7,000 species used historically to fewer than 200 cultivated commercially today. Roughly 60% of all human calories now come from just 3 crops: rice, wheat, and maize. The knowledge your ancestors spent 300,000 building, the ability to look at a landscape and find sustenance in it from dozens of sources, is nearly gone. You live in a world of unprecedented food abundance. Your ancestors would find it miraculous, but they would also notice, immediately, what is missing. Not the quantity, the variety, the resilience. The refusal to depend on a single answer. The next time the store shelves are briefly empty or the harvest fails somewhere or the supply chain snaps, you feel, for just a moment, what your ancestors solved every single day. Not with panic, with knowledge. They always knew where to look next. And somewhere, in the oldest parts of how your brain scans a landscape and notices texture and color and pattern in the natural world, so do you. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like and a subscribe for the video to have more motivation to make more. See you at the next video. Peace out.